All right, Friday is everybody's favorite day of the week, but it's especially mine because on the Morning Pit, we get to do the mailbag. We take questions from Pitt fans on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. So let's jump into it. Lots of great questions covering a whole bunch of topics. The Morning Pitt Mailbag right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, it's Friday. It's the mailbag edition of the Morning Pit here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You see the website below, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. The most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans all day, every day, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. That message board is where we take all the questions for the mailbag that we're doing today. So if you want to be a part of this, if you ever watch these Friday episodes of the Morning Pit and you say, oh, I want to, I got a question. I want to ask a question for the mailbag. Well, that's the place to do it. The premium message board, the Between Fifth and Forbes message board at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. And, of course, our YouTube channel here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video and subscribe so you don't miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content. We have the Morning Pitt videos Monday through Friday. We have our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Then, of course, the post-game show on Saturdays or whenever the game day is. We do it after the game. Figuring tomorrow night's 6:30 kickoff. Probably going to have the live show starting around midnight, somewhere around there. You want to make sure you don't miss it. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then you will know what we're doing all the time. You won't miss any of our live streams. You just saw the image that popped up right there. It'll circle back around. It's for Home Field. You know the deal with Home Field. HomeFieldApparel.com. They've got some of the best gear you are going to find. And I have to talk about how they've got stuff for lots of colleges all over the country, 150 schools. I think I saw they have something for the Indianapolis Colts now. So they might even be branching into the NFL. I don't know. It doesn't matter because their Pitt gear is sweet enough that you're not going to even want to check out anything else. You're just going to want all the Pitt stuff that they have. When that image pops back up, look at the two logos just in that picture that I chose. And they got a lot more where that came from. It's a classic look. It's not just vintage. It's a classic, and I think it's instantly recognizable as being Pitt. It's got historic connections to Pitt and the university and the athletics, athletic programs at the University of Pittsburgh, and they're on, they're printed on really high quality shirts, super soft. They hold their shape. It's just a great product overall, and it's some of the best Pitt shirts that you're going to find. And they also have joggers, they have sweatshirts, they have the sweet bomber jackets. They got dad hats. They got everything you could want. HomeFieldApparel.com. And if you go right now, you use the promo code, and you'll see it pop up. Promo code LAIR23, LAIR23. You can get 15% off your first order at HomeFieldApparel.com. So you can't beat that. Some of the best gear that you're going to find, and at a discount, 15% off. So go check it out. HomeFieldApparel.com, promo code LAIR23. All right, before we jump into the mailbag real quick, quick note on the basketball side, since the news came out yesterday, and it would be a while before we talk about it. Papa Conte is going to miss the season. This is a 4-star center prospect, signed with Pitt late in the recruiting cycle, and came in as sort of a surprise add to the 2023 recruiting class for Pitt. Made a good class look even better on paper. And he's going to miss the season due to an injury that was suffered apparently Wednesday, a non-contact injury during a workout. Disappointing news for the freshman center for sure. I think when you look at it, Pitt is, I don't know if I want to say deep. I mean, what's deep? What's depth, right? But they've got Federico, and they have Guillermo Diaz-Graham. All right. Papa Conte was, at best, the third center, and I wonder if he'd even figure into that role if they ran into an emergency situation where they needed a third center, if they would go with him or if they would just slide Jorge Diaz-Graham into that role, which they did last year. Either way, he wasn't going to be a backup. He wasn't going to be seeing prominent minutes. I mean, you're looking at a guy who might average 2 or 3 minutes per game. And I don't mean to downplay this. I don't mean to dismiss it. It's really unfortunate for him. It could have been a great year for seasoning, for him getting a little bit of playing time, particularly in the non-conference, if they had some opportunities to get him on the court for extended minutes. And it's disappointing for him that he's going to miss out on those opportunities. But I think they'll be okay at center. Obviously, if you have an injury to Federico or Guillermo Diaz-Graham, now you're going to be in a tough spot. But guess what? Even with Papa Conte available, if you had an injury to one of those two guys, you were going to be in a tough spot. For me, it doesn't change a whole lot about the outlook for this season. I've seen a few people with the reaction of like, boy, there's always some bad news. Something always happens to this team. So there's always something that changes things. Right around this time of year, to me, I mean, the bad news or the significant news happened a week or two ago when Dior Johnson was kicked out of school. In terms of impact on the team, that is going to be far more significant and far more impactful than Papa Conte getting hurt. So I don't want to say that it's not disappointing. I don't want to say that it's not a blow. It certainly does hurt their depth, but they would be in rough shape if they had to go that deep into the bench, for significant minutes anyway. So unfortunate for him, he'll be able to redshirt. He'll have, 4 more years to play after this. If he is so inclined, we wish him the best, and Pitt'll move forward basically with the centers they were going to move forward with anyway. All right, let's get into the mailbag. Start getting into some questions. Smenges jumped in first, as he often does, and we appreciate you. Says Pat Bostic sees more practice reps than the press, and he told you he was very high on the Pitt receiving corps. So my question is whether your outlook has now changed at all on expectations for that group. It's a good question. That's a good question. I mean, I would say that Pat was high on the wide receivers after watching them throughout training camp. I would say if anything changed for me. I mean, I talked a lot in the summer about how many questions I had about the wide receivers, about my concerns about the receiver group. I talked a lot about that. If anything changed, it's that some of the freshmen looked like they might be viable. Not just viable players or contributors, but actual good players, guys who could make an impact. We just had a photo that popped up there of Kenny Johnson, and he's a great example. We knew some of the freshmen were going to have to play this year, and I think there's another question we're going to get to after a couple about which freshmen will burn their red shirts. We knew some of the freshman receivers were going to have to play. They brought in 4, and I think our common line of thinking was that at least 2 would probably burn their red shirts, and probably all 4 would see the field at some point. Now all 4 saw the field on Saturday, so we already covered on that part of the bet. We knew that some of those guys would play. It was just a question of how much of an impact they would make. Now, when you get to the end of training camp, and there's been as much buzz as there was about Kenny Johnson and Zion Fowler-Ellis getting a lot of good headlines and pub and praise from the coaches. Now, maybe you start to change the expectations because maybe you feel like the group is a little bit deeper than you thought in June and July. There's still going to be, it's still never really ideal to be relying on freshmen, even though we've seen some exceptional freshman wide receivers come through this program. Jordan Addison, Tyler Boyd, Jonathan Baldwin, Larry Fitzgerald. We've seen guys come in and contribute in their first year. It's still not the ideal situation unless you have one of those truly exceptional guys. And I think it remains to be seen if Kenny Johnson is that truly exceptional guy. If Zion Fowler can be an exceptional player. Really like Bub Means. Really like Kanate Mumfield. Think Dejon Reynolds can be a solid player. It was always a question about who was behind them, about who was going to step up, who was going to contribute, and who was going to play and make an impact. And maybe it's the freshmen. And does that change the outlook on the receiving corps? Yeah, I think to a certain extent. Not necessarily because of what Pat said, although Pat Bostic's comments were based on watching all of training camp. And I think probably his perspective on the wide receivers changed from what it was in June and July to what it was at the end of August and the beginning of September after seeing those guys in action. So some of the concern has been alleviated, not all of it, because you're still relying on freshmen, and that's not ideal, but those freshmen look like they can be really good, so maybe a little bit of concern is alleviated. Rogue Panther says, what are your thoughts on Chancellor Gable's comments in the PG that she needs a market assessment to determine Heather Lake's worth? I would prefer she said Heather is one of the best ADs in the nation, and we intend to compensate her accordingly. I, for one, was not encouraged by her tone in the response to the question about extending Heather. I think she opened up Heather Lake for bidding. So this was, I think it was actually in the Tribune Review, or at least that's where I found the quote that I think you're referencing. It was an interview with Joan Gable, Pitt's new Pitt's new chancellor. The article ran a week or so ago. Bill Shackner has the byline, and the first quote in the article is, quote, from Joan Gable, quote, Heather is without question one of the best athletic directors in the country. She's been recognized as such for wins on the field and academic progress. So she's saying right off the bat that Heather Lyke is one of the best. Now, the quote that I think you're talking about is when she says, quote, if it comes to that, we would absolutely do a market assessment and see where Heather sits. So I don't know the question that preceded that. I don't know what was asked. In the article, the Bill Shackner writes, Gable said a conversation at the appropriate stage of Lyke's contract would be driven largely by a market evaluation of Pitt and compensation of athletic directors generally and someone performing at Lyke's level. My thought is that the question is, would she be in line for a raise when a contract extension comes up? And then Heather Gable says, if it comes to that, we would absolutely do a market assessment and see where Heather sits. I think, the impression I've gotten from, Joan Gable's public comments, where she says Heather Lyke is one of the best athletic directors in the country, and also just from talking to various people around the university athletic department, I think Joan Gable values Heather Lyke pretty highly and understands the work that Heather Lyke has done and the success that she has had. I don't think she opened Heather Lyke up to bidding. I think my take on that quote is she was using, bureaucrat speak for, we'll figure out how to make her one of the most well-compensated athletic directors in the country. Is sort of, commensurate with, Pitt's market valuation and in this market and in the ACC and the Power 5 and so on and so forth. That's how I took the quote. I could be misreading it. I don't take it quite as... It doesn't seem like she's like drawing the line in the sand or something like that. Rogue Panther also asked, why has there been no comment from Jeff Capel on the Dior Johnson situation, and do we know how the players took the news? Jeff Capel's not going to say anything about this. He can, the most he'll probably say is we were disappointed, and we're doing what we could, or doing what we can to help Dior, in any way we can, or something like that. And he's probably not going to speak to the media until like October or November, and so he won't be asked about it until then. He'll be asked about it for sure, but he's not going to get any of the details. There was I don't think he's going to, you're not going to get anything satisfactory out of Jeff Capel. I think probably, as far as the players, I'm sure they were disappointed, as they would be about losing any teammate, but I don't think we're ever going to get really anything on the record from any of those guys of any substance when it comes to that situation. H2P_JC says, any update on Tayshaun Banks' status in this current recruiting class? Yeah, Banks has been committed. When did he commit? March or something like that? And, I sort of feel, and I should put this on the message board too, I sort of feel like it's just a matter of time until he comes off the commitment list. And he never took an official visit. He never tweeted out an official offer. It sort of feels he hasn't been, it just sort of feels like that's inevitable. And we said that over the summer. Is probably why you're asking about it. We said that over the summer, that it's probably just a matter of time. And that's kind of still how I see it right now. Let's see the next question. Che the Jet says Franklin named 4. I got this wrong for so long. I called him Chet the Jet. Says but it's Che the Jet. Says Franklin named 4 incoming freshmen who would play this season. Who do you see for Pitt as to freshman players going past the 4-game limit? This is an interesting question. I think 9 freshmen, 8 scholarship players, and a walk-on kicker Sam Carpenter got on the field against Wofford. I could see, Montravius Lloyd looks like he's going to have a shot. I think Kenny Johnson is a sure thing. Zion Fowler-L possibly. There's going to be one of those other receivers. I would say Fowler-L is the most likely, but it could be Izzy Polk. It could be Lamar Seymour. So, 2 of those guys, Johnson being a definite. Braylon Lovelace, I would say for sure, is going to be one. So, you're looking at Lloyd, Johnson, Lovelace, and another receiver would be my guesses. It's interesting to see B.J. Williams get a little bit of playing time with the starters on the offensive line on Saturday. I don't think he's going to play enough. I don't think you want to get a freshman out there unless he's one of your 5 best offensive linemen and he's going to start. I don't think you want to put a freshman out there on the offensive line. No matter how, regardless of how good he is, if you have better options, you want to try and save that guy and develop and let him grow and have more years with you. So those would be my guesses: Lloyd, Johnson, Lovelace, and another receiver. NC Panther asks, does Bengali Kamara win the Heisman Trophy? I just don't feel like the Heisman is a big enough award for him. Yeah, I mean, like, for the kind of player that Bengali Kamara is and the accomplishments he's going to have this year, the level of play he is going to reach, the Heisman seems too insignificant for Bengali Kamara. I expect more. I expect them to invent a new trophy, the Kamara Trophy, for how good he's going to be this year, to recognize his accomplishments in the world of college football. Hitman 2003 says, you mentioned accuracy as a struggle for Phil. Is this something you heard during camp, or has that been a knock on him throughout his career? I think that's been a little bit of a knock. I think that's been a little bit of a knock on Phil Jurkovec kind of throughout his career. Got a big arm, but maybe not the accuracy you would like to see to go with that arm strength. But then when he's extending plays and throwing on the run, he's that's one of his big strengths as well. I don't think it's going to be a huge issue, but I've heard that that's a concern about Jurkovec. I mean, quite frankly, in the spring, I kind of heard that about Jurkovec and Christian Bear, that they both threw these passes that looked really nice, and I know there's a lot of concern about the spirals from Phil Jurkovec, but they both threw these really beautiful passes, but a lot of times they weren't quite on target, and so accuracy needs to be something. Like I've said a bunch of times, I really wish Jurkovec could have hit Bub Means on that deep pass against Wofford. That would have been a really good pass to connect on. It would have given me a lot of confidence and I think a lot of encouragement going forward. But he's going to have more opportunities like that. I think Bub Means is going to be able to get behind defenses. I think Bub Means is going to be able to create that separation. And I think when they get their running game going, play action is going to give them even more opportunities to find those shots. And he's going to have to connect on him. I mean, those are plays that will win games, and missing those plays will be the ones you look back on and say, golly, they just could have connected on that one that they had. Boy, he had a step on him and just overthrew him a little bit, and they end up losing by 3, and that was, that would have been a touchdown. Because against Wofford, I mean, that is a touchdown play. You can't leave touchdowns on the field. Now, they probably scored on that drive anyway or something, but you can't leave touchdowns on the field. And so accuracy, particularly on the deep passes, needs to be better from Jurkovec. He absolutely has to improve there. Mr. Manaka says, I'm sure many have the same question and concern regarding Phil Jurkovec's spiral. Has he talked about his seeming inability to throw a spiral? It stands to reason that he could gain velocity and distance with improved aerodynamics, though he threw one very deep this past Saturday. No one has asked him about his inability to throw a spiral. Maybe if we get a chance to interview him next week, we'll bring that up. Yeah, it doesn't always look pretty. I've seen him throw a lot of pretty passes. They're not always on target, like I said, but I've seen him throw a lot of pretty passes. It just sometimes doesn't always go where it's supposed to go. I don't think arm strength is a problem. I mean, he overthrew Bub Means. You know what I mean? So it's not like his arm is not strong enough or he's not getting enough out of the aerodynamics. I think he can throw it far enough. To me, it matters less about how it looks than it matters where it goes. And that's the important part as far as I can see with Jurkovec. Mr. Manaka also asks, during Saturday's game, did you notice more than a few instances in which it seemed to take an inordinate amount of time to get offensive plays called? It looked very much as if there were some communication issues. Perhaps these were just opening game logistics that need worked out, but troublesome in my view. Hope they get this smoothed out. I didn't totally I didn't notice that, but I'm also in the middle. I mean, I had my own opening game logistics of getting back into the groove of covering games no matter how long I've been doing this. Take a lot of notes during the games, and sometimes I don't notice that kind of thing. We'll keep an eye on it this week and see if they're seem to be slow getting the play in. It didn't stand out to me. I mean, they didn't have any major issues. I don't think they had any delay of game penalties, or maybe was there one? I forget. But I don't remember any major issues along those lines, but we'll keep an eye on it this week and see. I think if there were those kinds of issues, it would make sense to happen in the week 1, right? But it would also make sense to clean them up by week 2. All right, last one here, Mr. Manaka. We'll take your final question. I know this is you've had 2 or 3 here, but this is a good question, and a few of these questions that we didn't get to, we will save for next week. But Mr. Manaka asks, can you describe the Y shoot that we've been hearing about? Apparently, Cincinnati runs this route often, and it's been a problem for us in the past. Yeah, Y shoot. Pitt sometimes calls it T shoot. Basically, it's usually a running back, somebody coming out of the backfield and running basically right up the gut of the defense. The linebacker is supposed to be on that guy, and basically just running straight down the field, down the seam, or just right down the middle of the field on a passing play. Miami sort of famously did this against Pitt in 2020, I want to say it was, and in that case they used a tight end, but he was lined up in the backfield, and Miami used play action to sort of suck the linebackers in a little bit. Tight end gets behind the linebackers. Boom, it's an easy pass. And safeties sort of part with receivers offset and all these different things. And it's a well-designed play. It's set up well. So it worked then. Pat Narduzzi has been good, I think, for the most part. I know we often talk about he never makes adjustments and this and that. I mean, he's got his base defense that he doesn't really... He's got his base defensive philosophies and principles that he doesn't really bend on too much. But they've made adjustments and changes and wrinkles every season to adjust to the things that have given them trouble. So they hit that play. Miami hit that play. Might have hit it a couple of times. But Pitt adjusted to it. And as I think Narduzzi pointed out, or maybe Ryan Manilak pointed it out this week, Louisville tried to do something similar last year, and Servassier Dennis read it and was athletic enough to make the play and break up the pass. I think it was Manilak that pointed it out. He said, Servassier Dennis got a PBU on that play. And so I think they've got an idea of how to play it. They've learned how to coach it. They've got Shane Simon out there, who's kind of an experienced older guy. He should know what to do. He was on the team last year. He knows what Servassier Dennis read to make that play when Louisville tried something similar. And so if Cincinnati tries to run it, Pitt should be prepared for it. Now, Scott Satterfield saw last year how Pitt defended it, and he should have some sort of counter adjustment to that adjustment, but Pitt knows that he's going to have some counter adjustment to that adjustment. It's a chess match, it's wrinkles, it's back and forth, and ultimately guys got to make a play. And so it's Shane Simon particularly as the middle linebacker, but the money linebacker, Bengali Kamara, could get involved there as well. He's playing inside the box. Those guys will have to know it. They'll have to be prepared for it. They have to know it's coming and be ready to stop it. So good question there. I mean, that was brought up a lot this week. It'll be interesting to see how often Cincinnati actually tries to use it. It'll also be interesting to see how often you go to homefieldapparel.com and get some of the best Pitt gear that you're going to find. Don't forget, 15% off your first order. Promo code LAIR23, LAIR23. Homefieldapparel.com. Go do it now. You won't be disappointed. You also won't be disappointed if you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And that way you won't miss any of our Pitt video content like the live post-game show tomorrow night. Probably going to start around midnight. What better things could you have to do at midnight tomorrow night than sit around and drink and talk about the Pitt game? That's what we are going to do. So look forward to that right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And all day and all night, people will be talking about the game at Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. The most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all. Panther-Lair.com. Thanks for a great week of these videos. It's been a lot of fun. Really enjoyed all the stuff we did today, this week. We appreciate everybody tuning into all these videos. I've had a good time. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. Now it's game time. We'll Pitt Cincinnati tomorrow. Should be interesting. We'll see what happens, and we'll talk about it after the game. And, of course, next Monday, we'll be back with another Morning Pitt. So have a great day. Enjoy your Friday. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the game. We'll talk to you tomorrow night after the post-game show, and then we'll be back with you on Monday for another Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.